So good morning, Australia. Good afternoon to those coaches joining us from the US and Canada. Good evening to coaches joining us from across Europe. We really appreciate you taking the time, prioritizing the time to connect with us. This is the second in our leadership webinar series with key industry leaders. Today's conversation is going to be around business continuity, managing yourself and managing your staff, and what the industry is doing in these times. We're joined today by Darren West. Darren's the Director of GFM Accountants, and Kane Dewhurst, who is all things VIDA. But before we get stuck into the heart of our conversation today, just a few quick items. Probably most of you are joining us from your home offices, so no need to worry about fire exits and bathrooms and all that. That's all covered. But in terms of the structure of the webinar, we're going to probably spend about 20-25 minutes with our keynote speakers back and forth. And that'll be followed by about 5 to 10 minutes of questions. You can use the chat feature as we go along just to lodge your questions, and then we'll review them at the end. Don't worry about any of the resources or links that either Kane or Darren talk about. We'll send a follow-up email with all of those in them, so you can just spend your time listening to the conversation and focusing on the questions that you'd like to ask for today. So without any further ado, let's just kick off today's webinar. Two of my most trusted colleagues, and in these days, the kind of people that you really want on your team. But just a little bit of background about both of them. Darren's been with GFM Accountants since 1993. He became a partner in 2000. Certainly loves to work with business owners who strive to achieve more. And just a little bit on the side for Darren, he's a Western Bulldogs fan. And Kane might debate this, but apparently Darren's got a bit of a history around tennis playing. Yeah, Kane says no. But also he's a local footy coach, and when we're not in social isolation, spends most of his time being a taxi driver to his kids on the weekend. So Kane, and apparently this is written by Kane's wife, so I'm going verbatim here. Innovative tennis coach. Speaker, educator, businessman, that I can agree with, and entrepreneur. He runs a number of successful businesses, not limited to VIDA Tennis, VIDA Fitness, Footy, and VIDA Mind, and a host of other projects. His network has over 100 employees. I just want to welcome Darren and Kane, both of whom are joining us from Melbourne, Australia. Morning, guys.
Thank you, David.
Morning.
How are you this morning? I just probably wanted to kick. Go ahead, Darren.
No, I was just going to say it's a very cool morning here in Melbourne, Australia, and there's unprecedented times ahead, which obviously we'll discuss this morning.
Yeah. So probably kick things off with you, Darren. I can only imagine as we get minute-to-minute announcements happening from the government that you and your office must be in pretty high demand. How are you, and how's the office, and what's going on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis in the office?
Yeah, look, thanks, David. GFM Accountants, we employ about 12, 13 accounting staff, and no doubt for the last month or so, we've been sitting there taking many calls, many emails, text messages and the like, just in relation to what's actually happening, what incentives are out there. It basically seems like one day it was business as normal, and then bang, to the extent now that there is no one in my office, we're all working remotely. But every day the government are bringing out new options for employees, employers. Staying on top of those is the key, and then sort of relaying those back to our business and individual clients is very important.
I imagine one of my good friends who's a dentist when I used to idolize his work, he used to say to me, listen, I deal with people every day who come in with negative issues and fears, and that sort of landscape. What's that like each time you're interacting with a client?
Oh, Dave, look, it has been very difficult. I've tried to have my staff remain as calm as possible when talking to these clients. We're talking to clients who are going out of business. We're talking to clients who are losing their livelihood. They're just been devastated. I spoke to a client while Scotty Morrison was on the phone, on the broadcast. He'd said that he'd lost 80% of his turnover. Soon after the broadcast, after basically closing down the airports, he'd lost 100% of his turnover. Grown men cry. Some of the people who are as tough as anything, pretty upset by what's happening. But there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Our office is trying to stay as vigilant and strong as possible to make these people realise there is an option at the end. It just depends what they do right now in terms of trying to get to that option.
And how are you keeping people and yourself calm in these moments, especially given the amount of information that's coming out on a daily basis?
Look, if people do not understand what's happening out there in the big world at the moment in terms of what the governments are offering, what they need to do from a social distancing point of view, more business so from our point of view, they need to listen, they need to learn, then they need to look for opportunities. I spoke to a pilot yesterday, stood down, as a captain of Qantas on a very, very good salary, stood down. He said, "What do I do?" I said, "Go and stack shelves of coals." And he goes, I'll apply online right now. So they just need to listen. Not everything is for everyone. So all these government packages, which I'm happy to share at the end if you would like, but we've split them up into 3 different categories to try and make it as user-friendly as possible. So staying calm, just listen, learn, and just look for the opportunities.
Thanks, sound advice. Probably let's start the conversation off with individuals. So rather than someone who's employing someone who's an employee and or sole trader, when someone first approaches you, how do you focus them? What do you think their key priorities are, especially given many of them may have been taking leave or been stood down? How do you approach advising them?
It's a bit of a cliche, but we need to dumb everything back to basics and look at the survival, look at options to survive in today's environment. Whether that means they need to tighten their purse strings, look at their expenses. Obviously, that comes down to a cash flow impact. What cash reserves do they have on hand? A lot of it then comes back to their attitude. Will they put their head in the sand? Will they get the right advice? Will they take that advice? And similar to what I said before, opportunities/alternatives. Focus, let's say, on the outcome instead of exactly what's happening right now.
And over the next few months, I know you just discussed, the pilot who's applying for potential jobs at Coles. But how do people start to focus forward rather than being so reactive?
Look, there might not be a lot of jobs out there at the moment, although there are companies on a daily basis requiring the services of employees just stood down. So, forget about your normal day-to-day job. Just try and take on anything that's available at this point in time. So that's more from an employment point of view. From a cash flow point of view, I always have said this to people when they go on annual leave. Start looking over the next 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 months. Look at your own backyard. Look to see what savings you can put in place during that period. As much as look at your electricity and gas bill. Look at your home loan. What interest rate are you on? I spoke to my bank manager last week. I said, listen, I'm not up to the market. Can you drop my rates? And I got a 25 basis points reduced straight away. Look at your insurance quotes. Look at your health insurance. Are there any other alternatives out there? So that might not bring in any revenue at this point in time, but it's also going to look at some of your cost saving options to go through. And then let's just focus on the future. Individuals, if they are employees, they need to stay in contact with their employers. Be as direct or kind or whatever you can possibly do. I've got one employee who I've had to say, basically, he was supposed to start in a couple of weeks' time. I said, mate, well, I haven't got any work for you at the moment. But he said, let me do a couple of days for free for you guys, just so I can get into the system and understand what you're doing and just try and boost his education for when this is all gone and we're up and going again.
That's fantastic. No, I think we'll probably, certainly when we focus on business owners, that employee engagement, staff engagement is going to be pretty paramount, certainly to getting through these moments, but also to ensuring that we are best positioned when we come out of this moment, for the new opportunities. Any other final thoughts around individuals at this time?
Look, individuals are not just employees. They could be investors, they could be landlords, but a lot of employee/individual clients that have got investment properties. We've been pushing that pretty consistently for the last 20 years as an alternative to superannuation. So, superannuation now in the markets, yes, you should speak to your financial advisors, you should take the advice from them. Don't try and think that you understand what the markets are doing, because I think I've got a pretty good grasp of it, but I don't understand how the share market went up by 7% in Australia yesterday. So seek advice, individuals, talk to people, talk to your professional associations, talk to like-minded people, and then make an opinion for you the best path forward for yourself.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Sound advice. If we start to kind of transition to business owners, if I haven't seen one post or podcast on you need to survive right now in order to thrive later, that seems to be the rhetoric on social media these days. But when we talk about focusing on survival, what exactly is that? What does that really mean? Can you unpack that for us?
Oh, look, survival's are quite a number of things, mate. Similar to individuals, for any business right now, they need to understand their costs. They need to understand their absolute bottom line of keeping their doors open. There are many businesses out there that continue to trade, albeit remotely. So they need to understand at what point in time is their break-even analysis going to be achieved, but what they can actually do to reduce their costing, tighten their expenses in this current day and age. At the same time, it might mean that you should be out there promoting your business and looking for these alternatives. So cash flow is obviously number one. I still think employee retention is way up there. Employers need to keep in mind that one day soon, hopefully, these employees who are the backbone of their business will be returning. So maybe give them some training in certain areas that they might be falling down in. Ask them to continue to do some work that they possibly can. So employee retention is massive for me. Also communication, whether it be digital, whether it be personal, communicate with your clients, communicate with your customers, communicate with your suppliers. Let them know where you stand in the whole scheme of things, what you're trying to do, that you're still around, that your head's not in the sand, and just any other options out there. Speak to other business advisors, speak to your accountants, just look to see what might be available to you instead of just focusing purely on just your one line of business. Kane might talk about this later, but I was pretty impressed yesterday when I saw that Kane had sent a digital email out to their clients promoting some coaching from home. Kane, you can touch on that later, but that's fantastic. So yeah, from accountants, we're sitting there saying, how do we keep all our clients abreast of what's going on? We're sending out emails 2 or 3 times a week with as much information as possible. So business owners right now need to be focused for survival on all those things.
Thank you. If we go back to the cash flow, certainly with respect to some of maybe the more large expense ticket items, let's say landlords or any rentals, do you have any advice on how one approaches those big ticket items? How does that conversation look like? Do you have the conversation?
Dave, so far, I think last week I would have had the conversation with 50 plus businesses, because basically right now, their biggest ticket item is their landlord rental payment. I have childcare centres who are paying $18,000 a month for one childcare centre. I've asked them to open dialogue now. Don't wait for it to be closed down. Open dialogue with that landlord right now and find out what options are available. Landlords are going to be hurting as well. So they'll be hurting from a bank perspective. If they don't get the rent in, they might have mortgages. But landlords have options at the same time. They can go to the banks and do other things. But from a business perspective, open the dialogue, get into it, work out what your options are, negotiate. I had one client, country business last week, rang after my phone call, rang their landlord, and their landlord said, before you start, the answer is yes. And my client said, what do you mean? They said, yes, you can have rent free for 6 months. Now, that's one end of the spectrum. I've also had a travel agent contact their landlord who was threatening to bankrupt them if they didn't pay their rent. Now, that's probably going to change now based on this moratorium that the governments and state governments are bringing in, that landlords can't evict their tenants. But it just depends on the landlord's philosophy, and then the negotiation that my businesses can do with their landlord is in respect to those big ticket items.
With respect to the staff itself, obviously, certainly from an Australian perspective, ScoMo's announcement yesterday was a game changer, and lots of critique about whether that should have come a week or so earlier, but it's with us now. Even in light of that, what are some of your advice as to how do business owners approach their staffing? Perhaps walk us through, standing them down versus half-pay conversations versus, a couple of days of work, a couple of days of annual leave. Can you just walk us through the variety of options we have?
Of course, Dave. Well, first of all, from a personal perspective, we're GFM accountants. We've taken a staggered approach. So 3 or 4 weeks ago, we had a meeting with all the staff early one morning and said, okay, this is what's happening. We're not sure what it's going to lead towards. Our main objective is to try and keep everyone employed, keep everyone have their jobs, and we'll work out a way to be able to do that. 2 weeks ago, when things got a little bit more serious, we again sat down, went through. Our approach is still the same. We're trying to keep everyone employed, but the work, even from a professional business association point of view, was dropping off. Clients were reluctant to call us because we charge. We're not doing as much tax planning at the moment for an end of financial year because people aren't in business, so they don't need the advice in relation to how to reduce your profit. So the week before last, we decided that last week we were going to a 4-day working week with 1 day annual leave. So that allowed all our employees to still get their 5 days a week, so they could still pay their mortgages or their rent or all their expenses. And then last Thursday, I think it was, we've gone to a 3-day working week, 2 days annual leave. So we've done it on a staggered approach. There are a lot of other organisations out there that have just gone, you know what, the hit's too big. We have to, put you off now. Now, from a casual employee's perspective, that's pretty tough because they haven't got any leave entitlements. But there are options out there for employers to negotiate with their employer in terms of payment of annual leave, payment of long service leave, whether that be payment in full of your annual leave up front, or whether that be a staggered approach in terms of paying it. Hold on, I've just got to get rid of my security phone. Yep, you there? Good. Whether that's
still here. And now you're back on video.
Whether that be the negotiation being the employer pays half pay for weeks on end. We've got a couple of employees that have needed annual leave in the last 6 months, so they don't have any annual leave. We're allowing them up to a certain point. We don't know what that certain point is yet, but we're allowing them to go into negative leave. And those that use up all their annual leave, we're asking if they can take long service leave. But, right now we're trying to keep them employed. Late yesterday afternoon, our Prime Minister spoke about a job keeper allowance, whereby a set amount per fortnight was going to be paid to the employer based on certain conditions to keep their jobs alive. So this wage subsidy scheme is something that I'm going to have to sort of go through over the next 2 days, read the legislation, and it looks like I won't have to pay those employees annual leave. I can keep them employed 2 or 3 days, and this wage subsidy scheme might supplement some of that. So that's how we're approaching it. Staffing, you can cut them off straight away, or you can do it on a staggered approach. But keep them advised as to what's going on. Keep them involved in the whole conversation. That's the important part.
Never was it so important to be having good culture and relationships with your staff. These are the moments you need that to leverage on those relationships. You mentioned earlier about stimulus and support packages. Now, we have people from around the world joining us, and certainly there would be different packages within their own states and jurisdictions. But could you just walk us through what we have here in Australia, what the different packages are, what we should be looking into or finding out more information on?
Yeah, look, no doubt the government are trying to cover off every possible option, whether it be an employee, whether it be a retiree, whether it be in business. First of all, there are income support options for individuals. So no doubt, well, as we saw 1 or 2 weeks ago, the queue for our Centrelink here in Australia, which is our unemployment associated company, was 3 kilometres long. That was after the government announced a doubling in the payment, basically to New Start job seeker payments, which it is a fair bit of money for someone who doesn't have a job at this point in time, and who some of their costs might have been reduced. So the government here in Australia have increased the option for those employees that don't have jobs at the moment to double their income being paid from the government. There is superannuation. So superannuation is normally put aside until you retire. There's early access to superannuation, whereby you can get under certain conditions, not everyone, but if you meet the criteria, you can withdraw up to $10,000 now, and then another $10,000 in the next financial year if it's within 12 months. So, and look, it's not a bad option. But it depends on the person involved in the process, what their conditions are. Pensioners have been, they've been able to reduce the minimum pensions that they are to withdraw from their pension accounts. So normally, for example, a pensioner would have to withdraw 4% of their superannuation entitlement every year. That's been reduced to 2%. To try and sustain some cash flow in those superannuation environments for them. But cash flow assistance for businesses, obviously where our government has concentrated a lot of their efforts in. There's PAYG withholding, which is a tax that employers withhold on gross earnings. Employers can get 100% of that back based on certain conditions. So, if you were employing someone, you were paying them $1,000 a week, withholding $250 worth of tax, and giving the employer $750, that $250 that you are otherwise paying to the tax office is now going to be credited to your tax account. So theoretically, the $1,000 you're paying to the employees are only really costing you $750 at this point in time. Again, that's for a 6-month window opportunity, and there are criteria around being that being available to you. And increasing the instant write-off test for assets. This is more about businesses that do have cash flow right now, being able to acquire some of those assets that they need in their business that they otherwise were not going to buy at this point in time. They can get to write off up to $150,000 worth of those assets that they are purchasing. So here in Australia, that was basically stage 2 of the stimulus package. Stage 3, which sort of hit yesterday, is more based on the individuals, which I spoke about earlier, JobKeeper, increasing payments to employers to keep more staff on. But I think they're doing a great job. And similar to anything right now, our government here in Australia is doing it on a staggered approach. It's not just all in bang. It's who's hurting the most. Let's try and look after them.
Thanks for that explanation. And certainly, as you pointed out earlier, seeking some advice from your accountant or other financial advisor in these moments can't be underestimated. Any other sort of general thoughts before we transition to Kane, which I know you'll be jumping into that conversation as well?
Oh, I look forward to that one. But look, COVID-19, I see it as a roadblock, which we will get through. It's about you doing what you can do now to get through this, whilst in the midst of this unprecedented issue. It's how you handle the situation, which will obviously then maybe lead to a better possible outcome. It's a common sense approach. It's about negotiation. It's understanding your business and individual needs. It's understanding your break-even analysis, and seek assistance. We're forever telling our clients, please keep us involved in the process. Tell us what's going on. Get advice from us. So, like everyone around the world, we want this virus gone, but it's how we manage it right now.
Thanks, Darren. Sound advice. Kane, are you still with us?
I am here. This is the longest I've gone without speaking.
Come on now. I'm sure Naz would have a different opinion on that. How are you, mate? How's the morning? How's your family? How are things?
Everything going very well. I was up nice and early. One of our Vita Fitness, we've decided to go online. So we had our first online gym session this morning at 6:30, which I logged into and sat and watched and didn't participate. So I copped a lot of abuse from the trainers. So why didn't I have my Lycra on?
Oh, are you using a platform where the teacher can actually see everyone else and interact with them?
Yeah, we are. We're actually using Zoom as well. We decided to go live online on Saturday night, and we had it up by Monday, ready to go. So yeah, it's a quick turnaround time, but it's something that, like even Darren mentioned, then engaging with our customers and engaging with our community is really important to how we transition when we're all past this. So even to have this small interaction online with the fitness community is really important for us.
Yeah, I would agree. So what are you doing to keep yourself and your family calm and focused during these times?
Well, for me, it all starts with your own mindset. It's very easy to turn up with this and have the poor me mentality straight away, which I think probably I went through for about 45 minutes to an hour before I realized it's from that I have to change my mindset and get a purpose, create a plan, and then start making progress. I think one of the key things is to show up with energy and show up that the challenge is here, and we might be playing a bit of defense at the moment, but at some stage we're going to be through this and we're going to be back on the attack, and we've got to make sure our business is ready for the upswing once we get to the other side. So I think for me, it's just making sure we come with the right mindset and attitude to looking forward past this and see what we can do in the meantime to make sure that at the end of it, our business has survived and our I guess as an individual, your mental health and the mental side of things is very positive as well. So when we come out, we're ready to enjoy back to life as it used to be, or even better.
Or even better. And how are you communicating that kind of mindset, that approach out to that broad team, such that everyone has the same level of calmness and focus?
Well, I think the way we communicate to our people, whether it's at our team that works with us or our customers, is making sure that we don't make these rash decisions. We be calm, informed, calculated, ensuring that everybody has like a really clear idea of where we're going to get to in the end. Especially the amount of stuff that's on social media and mainstream TV these days it's very easy to be alarmist and believe everything that's written out there. So I think sometimes it's better to get off social media and TV a little bit and just control the things that you can control, and then seek that advice from the experts. So I think over the last week, it's been really important for myself and my team to go through and speak with our accountants, speak with financial advisors, your business leaders, and just get as much information as you can. So when you do make a decision, it's a really clear thought and concise approach to how we deal with these decisions. Like Darren said, it seems to be day by day at the moment where something changes. So we have to just keep rolling with the punches and keep gathering as much information as we can.
So Darren talked about, getting your cash flow priorities under control, getting focused on that. How are you approaching that across all the Vita businesses?
Yeah, so we went business by business, and then effectively we went line by line. So we went through and looked at all our baseline costs. And then planned it out across what the next 2 weeks, 6 weeks, 3 months are going to look like. There's certain costs that we all have within our business that we have to know when they're coming up and how we're going to manage that at that time. So Darren mentioned a lot about like cash flow and looking at your expenses, and it's quite interesting because in I guess positive times where business is going well, I think in general we tend to overspend in a lot of areas. So it was a bit of an opportunity to do an audit of everything that was going out the door in our business and start to trim back some of those costs so we can run a lot leaner. But at the same sense, we still have to be able to engage with our customers and retain as many of our key team members as we can. Because how we handle the situation right now and how we handle people is going to determine the business we have to come back to later. So it is definitely a balance of the human element versus the requirement to make sure your business is still operational and alive at the end so that we can have people come back to us.
So with respect to that sort of human element right now, 100 employees, that's you're not picking up the phone to everyone. Just practically speaking, how are you keeping connected with the team, and how are you managing their headspace at this moment?
I think I've probably picked up the phone with most of them, to be honest. I spent a lot of time on the phone for about 2 days in a row speaking to everyone. We also have meetings like this where we have team meetings online, but there was also discussions in person before we obviously went into as close to a full lockdown as we're going to get before it's a full lockdown. So really it's one of those things that you've got to use technology to be able to communicate as best you can with your team. So whether it's through closed Facebook groups or video calls or actually on the phone, then just making sure that you keep them in the loop and informed, and so they understand that we're all in this together. It's not just them as the employee hurting. It's also us as the employer as well. And we're, obviously we treat each other as family, and we want to make sure we're looking after each other. So even if you do get to that situation where you have to stand down an employee, it's making sure that they understand that they're going to have a job to come back to. we keep in contact during that time, and then we keep moving forward together.
And during this time where you're obviously not delivering tennis and most of your core businesses, how are you leveraging the downtime in business?
Well, probably like I said earlier,
Darren, you might need to mute your mic.
we have to plan. We plan for the upswing. We know at some stage we're coming back to coaching or delivering fitness or footy or whatever it is that our business is doing. We're going to come back to deliver that service. So use this time to work through every task that you've put on hold because something more important has come up. Use it to plan, to get educated, to put systems in place. It's quite amazing how much you can find to do if you come with the right mindset. There's also an opportunity for a lot of your team to get out of their comfort zone and learn some new skills that's going to help them deliver a better outcome for the business long term. So I think you've just got to have those conversations with each person in your team and make sure there's a growth mindset rather than that sort of fixed poor me mindset.
It's interesting because there are so many things, annual plans for athletes, tournament calendars, rejigging your programming to maximize court space. The list goes on and on in terms of what I hear from tennis coaches in terms of, well, if I weren't on the court all the time, I'd love to get to this, I'd love to get to that, updating your website. Are there any other pet projects that you've been meaning to get to as a business that you're focusing on during this time?
Yeah, we were actually in the midst of planning of a website rebuild, but I think what we've done instead is looked at our customer communication workflow a lot more. So really trying to make it as individualized and personalized as possible. So even in these times now, the communication to our customers is of paramount importance to us because we want to ensure that we're retaining as many people into our business, but holistically as many people into the sport as possible when we come out the other side. I see it as an opportunity in tennis. Tennis is one of what I would think is going to be one of the first sports to be able to come back online, being social distancing, open space, small class sizes. So there may actually be an opportunity for growth as soon as we're able to trade again. So retaining our current customers through a really quality customer engagement and communication strategy now is really, really important. So Darren mentioned earlier the emails and sort of the communication that we've come out with. We're putting out content around hot shots from home for younger kids, develop your tennis IQ from home, different match analysis, different learnings, movements. It might be, there's another stream called Tennis from Home, which is a sort of a more player development type of stream. And we'll put out daily content in each of the three sections so that you're still not only just engaging with them, but it's giving families and players and kids and everything something to keep their mindset on and make sure they're still thinking about tennis. The last thing we want to see is everyone just goes to sitting on the couch and watching movies and, sedentary lifestyle. We will need to keep people active, engaged, because it's really important in these times that the fitness component and the health and well-being really helps drive our mental health as well. We can go a little bit crazy sitting in isolation. So I think that the more we can connect with people and help people through this, the more it'll help our business and the more it'll help with people on the other side. So the communication piece is our main focus right now. And then we'll help to strengthen that once we actually get back to getting in the real world and seeing each other again.
I know you and I have had some conversations over the last week or two about how you get tennis coaches on the phone speaking to clients, which in the best of times, when there's no stress, can be a challenging thing. So how have you re-engaged your staff around client communication? Any tips for us there?
I think everybody communicates differently. Like all our team will like a certain form of communication differently, and our customers will also like to receive communication differently. But sometimes in these times, that needs to get thrown out the door a little bit. When it comes to, these are times that none of us have ever experienced or seen before. So we have to challenge each other to get out of our comfort zone. For me, I've asked our team to make a phone call and have a one-on-one personal conversation with every single person in our business. Now that's going to take a while, but what you start to find from the other end is you start to find out more about your customer, what their situation is. It's not about getting on the phone and selling your product and service. Effectively right now, we have nothing to sell. We're trying to make sure that we keep that relationship strong and know that we're there for them at the other end. So we just looked at creating some general guidelines for our team that they could go through. And these are some of the questions you might ask. But I think the key thing at the end is actually just listen and show some empathy once you get on the phone. If people aren't in a place to have that phone call, then there's plenty of other forms of communication as well. You can make them a quick little video, 15-second video just to drop in, send that across to them. There's all the social media platforms and so on. I think just first and foremost, the effort of communication is the first start point.
Absolutely would agree. Could you give us a little bit of insight into sort of what Hot Shots looks like at home or from home? What are a couple of the things you're trying to achieve there?
It's just lots of different skill activities.
Without any trade secrets.
Right. It's not rocket science out here, and everyone can go on the website and have a look if they want. But a lot of it's just engaging little games, little competitions. We put one out yesterday where you have to stand 1.5 meters away from the wall because of social distancing. And how many little rallies against the wall in 60 seconds. Post your video. How many shots was it? Make a little bit of a competition. There's lots of different activities that kids can do for skill acquisition at different ages, like 4 and 5, 6-year-olds versus sort of an 8-year-old might be different in the way that they can play. So there's a whole range of activities. So we just try and release 1 or 2 activities a day, and then think about how they're going to link to the other activities that we've released. So lots of different progressions and regressions, and it's probably an opportunity to educate parents around what we do and why we do it as well. Especially in the younger early learning hotshot stage, where a lot of parents will ask us why we do, activities not having a racket in their hand when they're there to play tennis. So upskilling and educating in a lot of different areas this is a good opportunity to help from all people around tennis.
Yeah, no, I definitely see that in the same way that coaches sometimes can complain about not having enough time to attend to things. I sense when there are no tournaments, when there is no immediate goal, it's really easy to take a step back and focus on, maybe some physical imbalances in your body, or maybe improving your fitness level, or raising your tennis IQ. This is actually a good moment for consolidating and focusing on things that, if you're on the treadmill, it's much more difficult to do in the running. Probably just throwing out to the two of you at this moment in time. Darren, you've been probably listening to Kane for a bit, and I know that you two have a really long and lasting relationship on and off the court, business and tennis. Any reflections or thoughts on Kane and how he's approaching his business?
Oh, look, Kane takes, for me, he's probably one of the...
This is your moment, Darren.
Or is it? Can I be honest? Look,
absolutely.
Kane is a credit to himself in terms of his holistic approach to business, not just tennis. He's always looking to seek a competitive advantage. He better pay me for this later on, and he seeks advice. He's more than happy to ring up and ask me a question, albeit 3 seconds, albeit 3 minutes. It doesn't matter. He wants to be informed. and then he passes that on to his customers at the same time. So his willingness, from my point of view, to look after his staff, to have staff retention, just shows the type of person he is in business. And like I said, holistic approach is bloody important. I shouldn't say that, sorry, but it's very important in terms of don't just concentrate on the drop in revenue. Look to see what else you can do. Look to see what else competitive advantage is out there. So I admire his approach to business.
And Darren answers.
Appreciate that. Kane, you had.
I was going to say, Darren answers my calls at like Sunday night, 8 p.m. Just a quick one.
That's true.
45 minutes later. Kane, I'm going to rely on you a little bit to look at the chat function and see if there are any questions from the audience. Given my change in technology this morning, I don't seem to be able to be accessing it as effectively. And while he's doing that, Darren, just a question to you. You spoke about, sort of what this looks like after us, after this moment in time. And I think Kane has sort of referenced it as well, that tennis might be well placed in terms of future social distancing as an activity that people go back to sooner than other group activities, certainly when it comes to fitness. Just from either one of you right now, do you sense any other, in a post-COVID world, if there's ever such a thing, with social distancing that may remain with us for quite a while, are there any other opportunities or things that you see that we might be thinking about differently?
Look, from my point of view, I think people will start looking at their bottom line, and I think what Kane said before is 100% true. While things have been good, and we haven't been through this type of matter ever before, I know I haven't personally, consumer spending has been too much. People haven't looked to try and tighten their belts or have cash flow left over. I remember speaking to a staff member about 2-3 months ago, talking about how important it is to retain some of your personal leave, sick leave, how important it is to retain your annual leave. Well, right now, it couldn't be more important. So stop maybe just living for today, but look to see what needs to be done moving forward. I think people will tighten their belts. I think people will look at their options from a banking perspective, saving money. But it's those people that are going to be also then looking at the opportunities that this COVID virus is providing in terms of what's next, what competitive advantage can we take on. They're the people who are going to come out the other end and flourish and go really well.
So Dave, we've just got a question through from Anthony around frustrating we can't get on to coach private lessons at the moment, and how can we get TA to back us with this. I'll sort of look at that first. I think the thing with that is you'll find most of, in our case here in Melbourne, most of our venues were closed by the council or by the owners of the venue before Tennis Australia or Tennis Victoria come out with the policy in recommending that we cease. I think what you'll find is that their policies is always going to be a recommendation, because as a governing body, they can't tell us how to run our business. They can't dictate to us in that term. So you need to make a business decision. For us, when we decided to probably cease coaching, when we did, it became nearly about a reputational branding decision as well. We felt that the public sentiment was so against these type of activities continuing. In general, there were some people that obviously still wanted to have tennis lessons, and there's some people that thought that it shouldn't. I just personally thought I couldn't call up our clients and say, Coach Blake has coronavirus. You need to go and get all your kids checked, or you need to go and, I think we need to sort of think of the big picture. There is a fair bit of short-term hurt for all us coaches out there. And trust me, I'm not immune from that as well. I think we've just got to continue to take the advice and recommendations from our governing bodies, from the governments, from the councils, and then work forward with that. I do think we'll be one of the first sports back, though.
And look, Kane, I agree with you from a moral point of view, because being involved in local football clubs, we still had, when things were not going very well and there was, the advice was to stay at home, we still had local footballers training. My son played in a seniors football match on the Saturday when things were being closed down before that. Now, morally, I think that was the wrong decision to take from the football club. And I let them know that, and very soon after it was decided to close everything down. So from your perspective, and I know I spoke to you about this, and the issue being that, I think predominantly people wanted to stay out there and they wanted to keep doing it, but they needed to stay safe. So staying safe was, unfortunately, tennis clubs closing down for the interim.
Yeah. Next couple of questions. How would you plan or schedule any programming knowing there is no set start date, or how to communicate those plans to patrons? It's a very good question. You essentially can't. I mean, we've probably gone through 2 or 3 different sets of plans. With no set date to start, this is where the communication to your customers becomes really, really important. And to have a consistent communication plan between now and whenever that start period is, so that they get used to opening emails, speaking to you, and you can roll that out quite quickly. What I would say about your planning, that when we do come back, you're not going to have the same ratios of coach to players or coach to courts as we had before. There is going to be restrictions around the number of people that we can put on tennis courts or the number of people we can put in spaces. So you might want to be looking at your programming now and looking at your margins and your price points around looking at more private, semi-privates, or 1-to-3 ratios, because when we come back, I wouldn't expect you to be able to run 1-to-4, 1-to-5, 1-to-6 ratios. You've also got to look at, when your customers come back, what they can afford to pay as well. There's a lot of people hurting out there, and tennis is definitely a want, not a need. So you might have to look at ensuring some kind of, price structure that enables everyone to play at the price that they can afford, which is going to make an impact on your margins. But at some stage, it will get back to business as usual. You have to just plan around how you would see that. Next question is, what should we plan for in the percentage revenue loss for the initial with the initial coaching resuming? Wow, that's very difficult to put a number on it. And I think planning in terms of percentage, we're factored in terms of what our retention rates we think they will be. I think it starts with actually knowing what your current retention rates are before this as well. So if you know that at term to term your retention rates were 85, 90%, you'll get a fair idea, if you've spoken to all your customers and the way you've communicated with them, how many of them are in a position to come back. So in all the calls and in all the communication with our current customers, we're also getting a feel. We're not asking them, are you coming back? We're not trying to sell them anything. We're not trying to be pushy around that, but you'll start to get a feel. It'll also depend on what type of, what type of area is your target focus in your business. If you're a high performance coaching business, I would anticipate that your retention is going to be very high. If you're in a participation hotshots target area, then it may be a little bit lower in participation number because they're a social recreational player. So it's very hard to put an actual percentage on that.
Kane, what we're obviously hoping for is that we've got children at home right now who will be climbing all over the walls, and parents will be wanting to get them out as soon as we possibly can into an environment whereby they will enjoy life again. So if you guys as coaches can stay in contact with all of your coaches and let them know, or your customers, and let them know that as soon as it's up and going, please bring your kids down, let them run around outside, we'll look after them.
Yeah. There's actually a really good question here for you, Darren, and this is actually one that affects our business as well. Will yesterday's 1,500 a fortnight payment be available to non-Australian tax-paying employees? I have 3 staff that fall into this bracket. So probably the backstory on that, they could be on a visa, but they're not an Australian citizen, and so currently they're not eligible for anything from the government in terms of job seeker. So the question would be, like, is this job keeper eligible to them?
Oh, look, right now, I haven't read through the entire legislation because it still hasn't been written yet. I briefly read about New Zealand residents who are working over here on certain visas being able to access this $750 payment per week, $1,500 per fortnight. In relation to non-residents coming from other countries, I'm not sure. It'll be a 1 to 2 day time lag before we get access to the complete legislation. But I'm more than happy to take your email on, and if you can provide your email address, which I'm sure you can, I can get back to you as soon as we find out exactly what's going on about that.
Okay, I think I'd follow up with that is that even my team, I probably had every single person in my team contact me yesterday as soon as this was announced. The key thing when you go to the ATO website, it says if the legislation is passed. So once they have to pass that, and then on that, there's always the fine print. There's always how this is actually rolled out. It's never as straightforward as it seems, but on the surface, it says that it's available to any casual that's worked with you for more than a year. So I think that if your staff fall into that bracket, there's a possibility that's going to be available to them. But we're just going to have to see how it sits in the next day or so. Little bit of feedback around just transitioning from winter to summer, new programming, that type of thing. Possibility in term, if we do get back in term 2, that you might run a 4-week program instead of an 8. There's lots of different scope around that. We've just said that non-residents know it was just on TV earlier. Okay, so those are the things. We're just going to have to work through this in the next day or so around how all these incentives and grants and things really get rolled out. That's all the questions we got on that day.
Interesting, Kane, when you're referring to... thanks, Kane. It's interesting when you're talking about future programming, just in terms of terms, because I know we've been very used to running terms based on how school terms and school holidays run. But one thing we probably all need to be paying attention to at the same time is what will be the adjustments in the education system during this period of time, which will affect when people have their leisure time and when they have their availability. And I think there'll be some interesting adjustments there as well. Any final thoughts from both of you? From Darren, I'll just pass over to you first.
Oh, no, look, Dave, first of all, thank you. Thank you for putting this together, listening to the approach that many businesses and individuals need to take. Look for the future. Don't look for just now. Improvise. For some of the comments that Kane's saying, look at the AFL here in Australia. They're improvising. They've changed from a 22-week season down to a 17-week season. That could go to a 10-week season. We all need to improvise. We need to move the goalposts and look to see what the possibilities are. A 4-week coaching term is better than a 0-week coaching term. So don't look at it as if to say we're only coaching 4 weeks. We're still coaching those 4 weeks. We're still looking after children and young adults in a sporting environment, which is important. So just look at the options available to you, stay focused, and just take a common sense approach.
Thank you, Darren. Any final thoughts, Kane?
Yeah, it's similar. I mean, we just need to continue to be agile within our business. Things change day to day so quickly. So the quicker we can react, but also have a clear plan and a clear thought process around that, the better we'd be. But for me, it's all about mindset for everyone approaching this. We've got to get past the poor me mentality and look for opportunities and look for growth in this. There's a lot of positives that can come out of this. It's just how we're actually going to look at them. It's a tough time, but it's also a challenging time. And I don't think, for me personally, I don't think I've ever been as energized in my business as I am right now, because it is actually so challenging. So it's really helping to make improvements in the way we do a lot of things. So it's just look at as many of the growth opportunities we can, and then we'll all come out the other side a bigger and better business, bigger and better industry.
I would certainly agree. Challenging times, and they certainly energize us to be able to come up with agile and great solutions. Gentlemen, I thank you for your time this morning and for your expertise and for sharing what's exactly happening on the ground in your spaces. For everyone on the call, thank you again for prioritizing the time to be with us. I'll send a follow-up email a little bit later on today in the next couple of hours. It'll have the contact information of both Darren and Kane, should you want to reach out to them. And of course, please provide me with any feedback, any speakers you'd like to see, any topics you'd like to have covered. In terms of the rest of the week, just for those of you who aren't as aware, tomorrow, same time, I'm catching up with Mark McManus, who's going to walk us through cyber safety, being cyber smart. And that's more important than ever, especially since we're working from home. And then on Thursday with clinical psychologist Malika Abbott, who will be talking us through wellness, both personal wellness as well as wellness for your team. And then finishing off the week on Friday with Alistair McCaw, who will talk to us about champion mindsets, resilience, and also what people are doing to move things to video delivery, how we're changing the delivery of our programs and services. So share it with your friends, pass it along, hope to see you online, and everyone have themselves a good day, afternoon, or evening. Cheers, everyone.